all the different types of moral principles there are, and cataloging how God's behavior in the world gives him authority for those principles, it could come out, it may very well come out, and I'm going to say it's guaranteed to come out, that God's authority isn't infinite. There are limits on God's authority. Is that an appropriate idea? That there's a limit to how far God can go, how much moral authority that he has. Now, when you think about that intuitively, yeah, but God is infinite, beyond limits and boundaries. How can you put any limitations on God? That sounds appealing intuitively, but the Jewish tradition doesn't agree. The Jewish tradition does recognize limits on God's moral authority. However you'll justify it in the end, but it recognizes those limits. One example of that is what I told you about Abraham. When God says to Abraham, I'm going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham says several things, as we saw, but one thing that he says is, you can't kill the righteous. You can't do that. Shall the judge of the earth not do justice? And as I said, God doesn't say to him, Abraham, you're making an elementary mistake. I have infinite moral authority. Whatever I do is good by definition. He doesn't say that. What he says is, I won't kill the righteous. There's another application of this. The problem of innocent people suffering is a deep and difficult problem. As you probably have heard, the book of Job is largely about that problem. Who's the author of the book of Job? Moses. It goes all the way back. So it's been a problem. Now, what exactly is the problem? Well, if these people are innocent, they shouldn't be suffering. And since God's running the world, then how come he's causing or letting them suffer? And the answer, in all of the books that discuss this subject, the answer isn't stupid. There's no question here. God's doing it, so it's right by definition. Nobody says that. The problem of evil is like a conditional problem. If this person is innocent, and if the suffering doesn't serve any good purpose, then it's wrong that he should suffer. And if God is causing him to suffer, then what God is doing is wrong. And the answers that are given are always either he's really guilty, he isn't innocent, he made a mistake, or the suffering serves some good purpose and you just weren't aware of it. This is a case where we don't know what's the conditions that are going on. Nobody says it's not a question. Nobody says it's just a mistake in logic. So here again, if he's really innocent, and if the suffering doesn't serve any purpose, God doesn't have the moral authority to impose that suffering. So there are limitations on God's authority. So this picture of the source of God's authority that I'm giving you, if it leads to the conclusion that God's moral authority is limited, that's okay. Because from our point of view, God's moral authority really is limited. Then you'd have to check in detail whether the limitations built into my picture match the limitations that the Jewish tradition recognizes. There you might have a problem. You have to work that out. But the very fact that it's limited isn't a problem. Okay? Now, what then about cases where the Jewish tradition presents an idea and it looks like it's morally objectionable? How can we handle it, given these resources or other resources? How can we handle it? And one of the great examples of this is the sacrifice of Isaac. God commands Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. And Isaac is at least innocent. Really, he's much more than innocent. He's the moral and spiritual exemplar of the age. He and Abraham. How could God, now here I'm going to put in a prejudiced remark, how could God command Abraham to murder Isaac? Isn't that wrong? So I want to fill in some background for you, which I think will show you that this way of putting the problem isn't correct. How could God command Abraham to murder Isaac isn't a correct way of putting the problem. So first of all, let me give you an example. Let's see if we can agree on a very simple moral judgment in a trivial, non-controversial case. I don't know if you've ever been in Israel to a developing neighborhood. They're building houses, multifamily house, small apartment buildings, and some get finished, some aren't finished. And sometimes you see thick electrical cords running from one building to the next. Why is that? Well, it's because the person who purchased the apartment in the building that's not finished yet, his rent subsidy has run out, and if he stays where he's renting, he's going to have to pay rent. And he bought this apartment already, and it's not finished when it was due, so he's got to move in, but it has no electricity. So he goes to the guy in the next building and says, listen, it's going to take 3 months there for them to finish the electricity in my apartment. Could I run an electrical line from your apartment? And often they say yes.
Is that legal?
I don't know.
I feel like that wouldn't be legal in America.
Probably.
I don't know. But it happens all the time.
Like an OSHA violation.
It could be.
Yeah.
But OSHA, as I checked, was an American institution.
Yeah.
So we don't live up to American rules, thank God. Okay, so now let's imagine that happens. Ruvain is in the unfinished apartment, and Shimon is kindly letting Ruvain use his electricity. 6 weeks go by. Shimon comes over to Ruvain and says, listen, I know you've been using my electricity. In 2 weeks, I'm going to get heavy equipment into my apartment. I'm going to need electricity for myself, so 2 weeks from now, I'm going to have to disconnect. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to disconnect. Now, let's look at it from Ruvain's point of view. When Shimon says, I'm going to disconnect, is Shimon victimizing Ruvain?
Not really.
Is he treating him unjustly, trampling on his rights? Let's see what's going on here. Ruvain is getting his electricity from Shimon's grid. Hello? Ruvain doesn't have a right to Shimon's electricity. All he can do is say, thank you very much for the kind help that you gave me for the 2 months, but he'll have to make other arrangements. Rent a generator or run it to somebody else's place, because he's using Shimon's electricity. Okay, now let's take this very simple example and apply it to life and death. Vis-a-vis the Creator, our picture of creation, we're talking now about a problem for our religious view, so it has to apply to our religious view. Other views may have different ways to deal with it. We have to apply it to our view. Our picture of the creation is the universe started to exist some finite time ago, and God has continuously given it its existence moment by moment since then. Existence is based on a divine energy that's flowing into the world continuously. And I wouldn't have you associate that with Jewish mysticism, because Maimonides writes it in the beginning of his Mishnah Torah, word for word. God's will is sustaining the existence of the universe moment by moment. In particular, if a person is alive, it's because God is sustaining his life continuously. Now, people die. I'm sure you've heard about that. Probably read about it in the Britannica. Right? Leave out murder, but people die from accidents or natural causes and so on and so on. Our view is that these don't happen randomly, that God is running the world, and he decides when a person shall die. Murder is a special case, leave it aside. It needs special treatment. But lots and lots of people die not for murder. I would say the vast majority of people who die don't die for murder. So God is deciding that their lives should end. Why isn't every natural death murder? Why don't we accuse God of murder? Because he's the one who's deciding and engineering that the person's life should stop. One way to answer the question is this. The person's living on continuous free life that God is giving him. When God says, now is the time for your life to end, what he's saying is, you've been getting free life all this time, and I'm not going to give you any more free life. I don't owe you life. You have no claims on me. Not as if I borrowed money from you and I got to pay it back. I was giving it to you free. I've decided not to give you any more free life. That's hardly murder. So when God decides that someone's life should end, The ending of the life is something which God has complete moral authority to determine. Now, the only other question is, does it make any difference how he dies? Here's say, if I die in my sleep, that's one thing. But over a cliff, no. Sorry, you have the right to do that. Or struck by lightning, no. Just dying in sleep. I mean, his life ends either way. And since God is simply saying in each case, I'm not giving you any more free life, the end of the life can't be a claim against God. So now, what do we have here in the case of Abraham and Isaac? God tells Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. It means Abraham is commanded to end Isaac's life. But since it's God that's commanding him to do this, it's not murder. On the contrary, God is within his authority to determine that Isaac's life should end. And this is how God wants it engineered that it should end. Murder is when someone ends someone's life unjustified. He does it as a crime. He's guilty of a crime when he does it. When God orders the end of someone's life, it's not a crime. So it was wrong to ask, how can God command murder? When God commands ending someone's life, it's not murder. It's just not murder. Yeah.
So wait, so like, I just want to confirm, because I was talking to somebody about this. Does it say in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not murder or thou shalt not kill?
The strict word there is murder. It's rotzeach. To kill in Hebrew is laharog. Litzoach means roughly to murder. Okay, there are a few other usages of it, but there, in general, litzoach means to murder.
So it says murder in the Ten Commandments.
That's right.
Okay, good, because I was arguing with someone about that.
Yeah, the normal word for killing in Hebrew is laharog, hey resh gimel, and this is resh sadiches, which means to murder. So it would not be correct to say. I mean, if you had thou shalt not kill, what about spiders?
What about food?
Yeah, what about food? You know, so anyway, that it isn't kill in that sense. No. What about killing in self-defense?
Pikuach nefesh.
It's even more than that. Pikuach nefesh is saving your life. Here you're killing the other guy to stop him from killing you. That's a mitzvah. Habol l'horgacha. Somebody comes to kill you. Hashkem l'horgo. Get up earlier than him and you kill him on his way. So it can't be a prohibition against killing. That's not possible.
You can't take your own life.
That's right. You can't take your own life. That's also true. Yeah.
So like, what if you're in a situation like, let's just say you're a soldier, right? You have important intelligence, and you know that if you get captured, you're going to be tortured, and you could reveal important information that could put other Jews at risk. Is it better to take your own life to prevent the information that will certainly cause that could look?
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're onto something. It is there's a gigantic discussion because we've had these circumstances throughout history.
It's happening right now on those tunnels, you know.
We've had this discussion, and for example, if you know that you're going to be tortured so as to make you do a crime, which is a crime that you should rather die than do, then you can commit suicide.
You can't.
You can. You're allowed to. And we even know of cases of people who did it, and they were praised for it. Now the question is, to what extent revealing information is a crime that you have to die rather than do? But if it would be that kind of crime, then indeed committing suicide would be okay. So the question is a good question. It might have to fine-tune the details, but you're on the right track. You're definitely on the right track. You know, there's a statement in the Talmud. Rabbi Yochanan says, we don't trust general rules because every general legal rule in the Talmud, so as to avoid self-referential problems, has exceptions. And he goes on to say, even if the rule mentions exceptions, you have to expect there'll be other exceptions that weren't mentioned. But intuitively, you would say, if you tell me all A's are B's except for X, Y, Z, that's it, you know. All of them should be, all the A's should be B's. You mentioned X, Y, Z. No, P, Q, and R might be other exceptions as well. So here, the idea that you can't commit suicide, yeah, you can't commit suicide unless, and then there are exceptions, and your kind of case is one of the kinds of cases where you can do that.
I guess that's kind of what I was taught. I have like a friend who's a Catholic. He's actually in seminary to become priest, as I'm in yeshiva. So I'm interested to talk to him eventually once he can actually start using his phone again. But basically, like, one of the things we talk about is like abortion, right? And I've listened to Rabbi Bredowitz talk about it. Like, in Judaism, it's like, sure, there's a general rule where, like, usually you aren't supposed to do abortion, but you also treat things on a case-by-case basis, you know?
Yes, but the situation there is quite different because from certain other points of view, the fetus at a certain stage is already a human being. And for us, that's not true. So it's not the same question. For them, the question would be killing one human being to save another human being. For us, the fetus isn't human. Not human until birth takes place.
So then what is it? It's a soul?
It's a thing which can become human, but it's not yet human. So it won't be classified as murder. All the discussions agree with that. And by the way, it could be that for non-Jews, the situation is different. It could be that in the non-Jewish case, the fetus is human, and in the Jewish case, the fetus is not human. So there are background conditions here that have to be taken into account. Okay, so now, what happens in the case of Abraham being commanded to kill Isaac is very interesting. It's not that we know it's good for him or he did something else wrong and so forth and so on, but we're not taking into account God's relationship to the world, God's relationship to life when we ask the question. And we see that when we take that into account, the question to a certain extent evaporates because when Abraham kills Isaac through God's command, that is not rightly called murder. Now, some people are very disturbed about this. In fact, someone said something like this yesterday. It might have been you or somebody else. Doesn't this put us on a par with the suicide bombers?
ISIS and Boko Haram, like killing the Yazidis and like taking little
Right.
girls as like sex slaves and stuff like that.
Right. And does it put us on, and therefore if we want to condemn them, how are we going to avoid condemnation? Now, there are really two things going on here. The first thing is, what action is being performed? Well, A is killing B. But then after that, you have to ask, what justification is being offered for doing it? Suppose a person kills someone else in self-defense, as we said a moment ago. We're not going to condemn that. So you say, yeah, but you see, in this case, both actions are the same, and both justifications are the same. In both cases, the killer says, God told me to do it. Okay, right, that's true. The justification that's being offered is the same in both cases. But we have to ask also whether the justification is true or not. Did God really authorize this or not? One reason so many people have justified killing on the grounds that God told them is that God's telling them it's a good reason. It really is a good reason. It's just that in our case it's true, and in the other cases it's not true.
How do we know it's true?
Good question, but we're going step by step, so then the cases aren't comparable. We say it's true and they say it's true, but if ours is true and theirs isn't, then they're not comparable anymore. Okay? Now, I wrote a book about this. It's called Reason to Believe. It's just reprinted, so I have them upstairs if you want to buy one. You can buy one. Sorry?
Do you have any audiobooks?
I don't think it's audio.
Okay.
I think it's audio. We present certain reasons. That's the name of the book, Reason to Believe, that I claim other religions don't have, and I actually go through the claims of other religions and analyze them in detail. My book is 300 pages long. There's another 150 pages that are up online because they told me they're not going to publish a 450-page book. No one's going to buy it. No one's going to read it. But I went through the major world religions in detail, and I showed that the kinds of reasons that we have, nobody else has. And the other ones are subject to critique that ours are not. So I think that we can make a good case for that.
How do you know that, like, ours aren't subject to critique? Like, have you ever, like, because we obviously have a bias, you know?
Yeah, but, you can't cite bias as a reason not to trust your judgment if you decide to get married. aren't you? I mean, you like the girl, right?
Yeah.
And your teacher says, so you shouldn't trust your judgment and not get married?
True.
Yeah, I mean, you try to discount by, try to ask other people. I go through the writings of people of those other religions, some of them in great detail, line by line, to show that the arguments that they give are not satisfactory arguments. Now, I'm trained in philosophy, in particular area of logic and philosophy and philosophy of mathematics. So reasoning and logic is my specialty, and I researched it. I wasn't born into a religious family, so on my way in, I researched these things.
I see.
And the material is there in the book, so it's there. It's available. It's been available. It was probably the first 8 years ago. Got a lot of criticism, and I've responded to many of the critics online. So I think we have good reason to say that. But at any rate, one mustn't just stop with they say it's God and you say it's God, so therefore they're on a par. It's not enough what you say. It's what reason do we have to think that what you say is true? And if it turns out that we have good reason and they don't, then we're not comparable anymore. So we're not really like Boko Haram and other people like that, because they made it up and we didn't. Okay, that's, I think, the way in which I would respond to that problem.
And then there's another question. How do we know we don't make it up? But I don't know if you want to get into that.
The book is 300 pages long. That's how we know. I'm not going to do that now. So that's a way to look at the sacrifice of Isaac and see that it isn't a moral problem. Now, there's another case which some people have heard about. Aren't there certain nations, one of them is called Amalek, which we are commanded to wipe out, really like genocide?
Yeah.
And that does sound really problematic, doesn't it? Yes, it does. But there, it's simply ignorance of what the halacha is. And I'll show you this. I'm coming back. Because this is very important to know. Because many people don't know it. Even people with an otherwise good yeshiva education don't know it. This is Maimonides, in the Mishnah Torah, The Laws of Kings and Their Wars. That's the title of the last section of the Mishnah Torah. The 6th chapter says the following. I don't think there's any point in my reading the Hebrew, because I don't think you understand Hebrew. But, huh?
English is good.
Okay, so I'll just translate. One does not make war against any person in the world until you call him and offer him peace. One does not make war against any person in the world until you call to him and offer him peace.
We've done that with the Palestinians.
Tens of times, right? But it's more than that. I'll show you. He mentions Amalek and the 7 nations who populated the land of Israel by name. And he says this applies to everyone. Whether it is a war that is an optional war that you could undertake on your own, and whether it's a war that we are commanded to undertake, in both cases, you must offer peace. As it says, when you draw close to a city to make war against it, call out to it and offer it peace. If they agree to make peace, and they agree to keep the 7 commandments that God commanded the non-Jewish world, no one is killed. No one is killed. And then he sets out the conditions of peace that have to be fulfilled. Later he says, if you're talking about ones who don't agree to peace, then it depends upon what their lineage is and what nations they represent. And then he speaks about Amalek and the 7 nations. But always, in every case, you always offer peace. So this cannot be classified as genocide. Here you offer the peace and you can't kill anybody, not even one, period. So if you know that that's the law, and by the way, the Ravid, who's the famous critic of the Rambam, agrees because he only disagrees with one of the details of the conditions you have to set. And the Lechem Mishnah points out that Rashi agrees. Rashi says for certain cases you don't have to offer peace, but if they ask for peace, you must do that. And one of the proofs for it is a very interesting case in the Torah. There were two kings, two Canaanite kings, whose lands, whom we conquered and we took their lands. And in one case, God says to Moses, go to this king and conquer him and take his land. That's the command. Go, conquer, and take the land. And Moses sends messengers to offer peace. He wasn't told to do that. But he understood all wars require an offer of peace. Here he has the direct command, it's a Milchemes Mitzvah in gold. He's commanded by God to do this. And yet, you start by the offer of peace because that's how a Jew conducts war.
So isn't it like sort of like giving them an offer you know they're going to refuse?
First of all, even if you know they're going to refuse it, you have to make it.
Right.
And one of the reasons you do that is to put yourself on record. Mm-hmm. What are your values?
Right.
What are your values? My values are I don't enter into war until I offer peace. And with human beings, it's not easy to predict always what they're going to do. So I think it would be dangerous to just assume that they're not going to accept the offer. I'm sorry, one second. And in fact, one place that the commentators say this is learned from is from the Creator himself, because he offered the Torah to every nation on the planet before he gave it to us, and he knew they were going to refuse. So it wasn't a question of finding out for himself whether they're going to refuse or not, but he wanted it to be on record. This is how you deprive people of something. First, you ask them if they're willing to receive it. If they say no, then they don't get it. So I think that's a matter of procedure. Yes?
But, like, even given if you had a bad actor still bound by this rule that wanted genocide, they could just offer terms that purposely they know they won't accept in order to say...
Oh, it's not a question of making up any terms you like for the sake of peace. Here, one of the terms is that you have to keep the commandments that God said you have to keep. Well, okay, that's not my terms. It's God's terms, right? And the other is that they have to, in certain cases, they have, because they're in the land of Israel, they have to be second-class citizens. We don't have equal citizenship of people who are in the land of Israel. But that's more. That's all there is to it. There's nothing more to it than that.
There's not more. Okay, so the offer of peace isn't. It's just that it's not. Because I'm imagining it's like they're coming and saying we're either going to siege your town or, in the peace deal we're going to get this or that, and then it's like they could engineer it so that, they know the other party won't accept it because maybe you want war. It's like that's the counter argument to.
Well, look. First of all, they have the option of not choosing war but emigrating. We're not going to chase them to kill them. Genocide wouldn't allow that. Genocide when you surround them and kill them before anything else happens. We're offering the Palestinians precisely that, aren't we? Go! Hamas is standing there with guns, not letting them even move out of Gaza. But that's one of the things that Trump wanted to do.
Well, okay, you could say that, but theoretically, isn't that, again, playing devil's advocate, isn't that kind of like what Hitler was like with the Jews? Where, before he actually decided he wanted to kill them, he was like, go to America, go to France, go to Britain, we don't want you, go to Palestine even.
I'm not aware of that at all. I'm not aware that he offered or encouraged.
Yeah, he wanted to get them out.
Go.
Yeah, and nobody wanted to take them.
So they kept getting to a different point.
I'm not aware of that at all. I don't think that that's true. And after all, I'll tell you a story which illustrates this very well. The Mir Yeshiva went east, and it ended up for a brief period of time in Japan, and then it ended up in China, and stayed there during the war. While they were in Japan, a Japanese official came to the rabbis who were in charge of the group and said, the Germans hate you. And the Germans are smart. So maybe there's something wrong, because after all, Germans hate you. So the rabbi said, guess what's going to happen after they conquer Europe? Sure, you're their allies now, but their philosophy is an Aryan philosophy, and you guys with yellow skin and slitty eyes aren't Aryan. You're next. You're next. There's going to be nobody left but Aryans. So there was no idea that, oh, we'll just take over Poland and Czechoslovakia and we'll be happy. No, this was a worldwide rulership, and it was going to run according to their view. So the Jews will go to America, they'll be killed next year.
I guess, but like the point is that also
You know,
America
all the
had-
rhetoric, I'm sorry, all the
America had
rhetoric,
quotas for Jews back then too.
all the rhetoric was the Jews are poisoning the world.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that we'll be happy if they live in America.
Wouldn't you
So
say
I don't know.
Arabs could be poisoning the world?
There were isolated cases where people negotiated for a certain number of Jews to leave, and they bought thousands of trucks instead, or so and so and so on. But that isn't that Hitler said, the doors are open, I hope you all leave. That never happened.
Right, I see.
That never happened. That's, you know, that's the facts. So that's now. There's the next thing, which people will ask is, well, what happens if they don't accept peace? If it's Amalek and the 7 nations, let's say it's Amalek, so then the mitzvah is to exterminate everybody. Well, okay, it's not a genocide, because genocide wouldn't allow a negotiation of peace altogether. But it does seem like this is total slaughter, including children. How can you possibly justify
I
that?
think animals too, right? I think
Yes, in the
kill
case of
animals
Amalek,
as
yes,
well.
right. But frankly, Pacha Peter Singer, you know, I'm not going to worry about animals. And if he
Yeah.
wants to come and debate, I'll happy to debate with him. I think the thing is fundamentally not serious.
Yeah, but I guess the point is to show
But
just how
so let's
serious it
leave
is.
animals out of it. So now, I think the only way that I know to answer the problem of children is to use a different type of justification, one which I mentioned yesterday and briefly mentioned before, and that is that we don't know all the conditions, the historical and future conditions that are operating in this kind of case. I don't know. Have you heard of reincarnation?
Yeah.
So, let's imagine someone who, in the 15th century, was a Barbary pirate, and he murdered people, and he stole children and sold them as slaves, and he was not a nice guy. And now the question is, what should happen to him? And if there has to be applied some kind of justice, and his life didn't allow for that justice to be applied, reincarnation can be a way in which that soul comes back into the world. So when we look at the situation, we say, but it's a 7-year-old child. How could that happen to a 7-year-old child? The answer will be, in this incarnation, this soul is presently inhabiting a 7-year-old child. But 800 years ago, this soul lived to be an adult and committed atrocious crimes. If you fill in the rest of that history, your question isn't so serious anymore. If this had happened to him 700 years ago, when he was an adult, he probably wouldn't have bothered you at all. This crop guy who killed so many people and stole children and everything else, he died that death? Why is that such a crime? You just don't know that this 7-year-old child is carrying that same soul.
So you're saying the 7-year-old's going to become that guy who becomes like the pirate, right?
No, I'm saying he
wasn't
already
tied
is.
down to correct what he did before.
It's the same soul.
But like,
That's reincarnation. Re means it comes back.
right.
Not another new soul which comes to resemble it or something. No, it's the same soul.
Is that so? I guess another question I would have then is like, is it right to judge a person based off of what their past lives did?
How do you-
Let me give you an example. I have more to say, but let me give you an example. This guy robs a bank, shoots the teller, shoots at the police who are chasing him, and kills a policeman. And he goes missing for 6 years. Finally, they trace him, and they find him with fingerprints, and they capture him. They say, we're going to try you for murder and bank robbery. And he says, what are you talking about? I didn't do it. And they say, sure you did. We have footprint, we have fingerprints and everything else. He says, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Do a truth detector test. He passed the truth detector test. You see, because 2 years before, he got a bag in the head and he has amnesia. He has amnesia. He doesn't remember his prior activities at all. He's not lying when he says he didn't do it. He certainly doesn't remember doing it. So now you say, oh, well, okay, since you don't remember, that's okay. Fine, have a nice life. I don't think so. Otherwise, criminals could get out of punishment very easily. Just to engineer from a doctor to do what to the brain, what causes amnesia, and present yourself as someone who shouldn't be punished. Because, and this, people don't really appreciate this about amnesia, you don't forget everything. You don't forget how to use a telephone. You don't forget how to ride a bicycle or drive a car or cook a souffle. You forget your personal history. But your character is there, your values are there, your impulses are there, it's just you forget who you are. That's enough to carry an identity, and most people think, well, then he should be punished for what he did, even though he doesn't remember it. So that is, I think, similar to the 7-year-old who has the same soul but doesn't remember it. And in addition to that, we can point out that in the case of this kind of divine punishment, he will remember. After it takes place, God will fill in the memory, and then the memory of his history as the Barbary pirate will be melded together with his memory of the death as a 7-year-old, and he'll see it as one long history. And then he won't have any complaints.
And then will he come back? Or I guess it's kind of...
It could be. At that point, this particular problem has been rectified. There are other problems also that could be. And I put this in my prior book. Think about the children whom he stole and sold into slavery. Let's say he stole a 3-year-old and sold him into slavery. Could be that slave doesn't remember his childhood before the age of 3. So this person now is suffering slavery without knowing why. That's what he's suffering. To put the soul of the pirate in a similar condition, you've got to put him in a situation where he's suffering something and doesn't know why he's suffering it. And since the one he did it to was a child, if he suffers it as a child, it's a very direct replica of the crime that he committed. So I think that there's reason to think that that's not objectionable. Yeah.
Does that not make the torturer, slave master, killer of the child not guilty then? Where does it stop? Like, if they are guilty, then they just killed the child, and then that's like, if they're not guilty, then who's to say the people that the child in its previous life did atrocities to were not guilty themselves, were guilty?
That's quite well. It's coming out. In other words, I think your question is, does the suffering that kind of punishment remove guilt?
Yes, because if this child whose soul was a Barbary pirate in the past, this is their just punishment, then why would that make the person delivering that punishment guilty or not guilty of murder?
Oh, that's something else. That's something else entirely. This is very important. The fact that there is a divine decree that someone should suffer doesn't forgive the crime of causing him to suffer, because you have no right to do it unless God told you to do it. If you are the executioner of the court and you put the person to death according to law, then it's okay. But if the court says that he should die, and someone from the outside comes in and shoots him, he's a murderer. Because he had no authority to kill him.
Rabbi, can you connect people coming down with special needs?
Coming down with what?
I mean,
Look, every feature of a life like that has many, many different explanations, many different applications. I don't want it locked into one.
I'm not lucky. You go.
Well, but you said,
Because
can it?
I work with special needs men.
Oh, I see.
And right when that started, we had a grandson who was born, whose jaw was locked, paralyzed. And he still, he's 4 and a half, he still can't talk, he can't walk, he can't do anything. So.
But
yeah,
surely he can communicate. He can use sign language.
there's almost.
There's more going on than just the locking of the jaw.
No, it's a lot of things are.
Right.
So when it happened with the Ali Rebbe, the Rock said we should start.
So there are various different things. There are people like that often are the way in which other people are tested in terms of their kindness, their generosity, and their willingness to help. The question is the extent to which they're suffering. Not always are they suffering, because they don't know what they're missing. It's a little bit like dementia. There are 2 types of dementia. Some people, when they suffer dementia, know that they're deteriorating,
Right.
and some don't. So the suffering of the former is much greater than the suffering of the latter.
But I'm talking about the souls being brought back.
Yeah, that could be, but it could be one of many different explanations. Shouldn't be thought of as the only explanation.
I don't know. I just feel kind of like weird about the idea that like, I mean, I guess we can never, we don't know for sure that like, let's just say, let's just say we're fighting a war and there's collateral damage and some kid dies. We can't know for sure that this kid was, I don't know, a warlord. He was Genghis Khan. You know, we can't know for sure. You know.
But that's a different case altogether. You're not guilty for killing him. They're guilty for killing him by using him as a shield.
Right. Yeah.
You're not guilty. You have every right to
Yeah.
defend yourself. You don't have to die because they use somebody as a shield.
Yeah.
There's no obligation on you to do
what
that.
I mean more is like, so you're the scenario you were talking about is like in an Amalek situation where like you have to wipe out a whole village, right? You know, and I guess the decree is Amalek attacked us once, or many times, and basically they are irredeemably evil, and it seems like it's like in their genetics to try and kill us.
No, this is not the right approach because then we wouldn't offer them peace.
Right.
That's not the right picture.
Right.
You have to calculate that part of the picture in. You have to rethink the picture. That's not the picture that we're offering. The Gemara tells us that Haman's descendants taught Torah in Bnei Brak. Haman's descendants. Haman was from Amalek. So it's not genetic, not pseudogenetic, not built into the souls. Definitely not.
Right.
So recalculate the picture before you.
Because I always just kind of imagine them as like these robots almost, who are like they're sleeper agents, and as soon as they see a Jew, they're like, you know, like.
But you were still making an argument about, you know, even though, okay, there's a scale, let's say it's like a family and they decide against whatever to stay there, even though there was no peace agreement and they know they're going to come in, and they're in the town of where Amalek is, and we're going to come in, we're killing a child, and your argument is...
We're not going to kill the people there that aren't Amalek.
No, let's say they are Amalek, they're part of that tribe.
Yes.
Okay? But it's a child in Amalek, and it's the command is to come in and kill everyone. You're still killing a child, and the argument you were making was about reincarnation.
That's right.
Isn't that such a dangerous argument? Because then it's like from Hashem's point of view, it all works out. But from any mortal looking at what's happening, it's you can just kill anyone.
And then it's only when you have a divine command to do this.
But then it's like, how do you? It's like.
I mean, the commands are on record.
Right.
The verses in the oral tradition are on record.
Right.
They don't justify just killing people arbitrarily.
It's like for a shomer shot.
I'm not going to argue for prejudiced onlookers. You know, when people criticize.
Prejudice onlooker. An onlooker that just it's like.
When you say an onlooker, I suppose you're describing someone who hasn't listened to this lecture. Well, okay, because he hasn't listened to the lecture, it's going to look bad. But that's like a lot of things in life. When you look into them, my example always is take somebody from the central area of Australia, where the Aborigines live. Probably it's not true anymore. And you bring him into an operating theater. What does he see? Well, they interfere with the guy's breathing. They cut him with a knife and he bleeds. They sew him up with a noodle and throat. What is this? This is what they do to political dissidents, where they torture them or something. What's going on here? You tell them, no, it's all good. It's all good. It's all been beneficial. He'll be very difficult to believe you because he doesn't know enough whether to believe you or not.
Are
So-
you like not afraid? Because like I saw like a video online of Rabbi Gottleib that was like posted by like some weird neo-Nazis where he's like supposedly justifying slavery, but they're like chopping up the video. Like, are you not afraid of like by saying these things like, on camera, like some?
I'm not afraid of it because everybody knows the things are chopped up. I just saw a figure: 40% of what goes on on the internet is from bots.
True.
So, actually, they used AI on me.
Really?
Yes, about 4 years ago, somebody told me there's like an 8-second segment showing me saying, I forget what it was that I was saying, all non-Jews should die or something like that. but it was AI. And I said to the person who said it, it's obviously a segment taken out of a longer lecture. Find the lecture. Find it. Use AI to find it. It won't find it because it's not there.
This was before ChatGPT was a thing, right?
That's right.
Wow.
They engineered it. Somebody said it. I looked at it, and it did sound like me. It was my picture. My mouth was moving.
Yeah, like I saw the video, I'm like, that's not Rabbi Breitowitz. And then I actually listened to the original lecture that he was talking about, and he said something like, "Oh, well, slavery is a moral evil for humanity," But then, like, if you watch the video, it sounds like slavery is okay, It's like.
Thank you, Rabbi.